to see on the cloud at a later date. It's usually on our Zoom page for about a week. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this onto YouTube. We'll do some clever editing, maybe have a few sound bites and put that on LinkedIn so other people can benefit from the recording. So thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate people taking the time. I know some of us are still in lockdown. Other people are going back to work. So yeah, if you are joining us today for the first time, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it. So normally what we do is a presentation, and our presenter normally talks kind of at us for 15-20 minutes, all brilliant insight. But today it's going to be a little bit of an interview session with myself and Rob. And if you are just joining us, please just mute yourself for now, and then we'll open up the floor later on. I feel like I'm going to repeat myself a few times doing that. So we've just had Steve and Isaac join us, and I've just put them on mute. So here we are with Rob. Rob, please say hello to everyone.
Good morning, one and all. Hello from Harrogate.
Rob, thank you for doing this. We really do appreciate it. I know you're a very, very busy man. And you know, when I sort of introduce you, you're based in Harrogate. You're originally from Hull. You started in IT in 1988, which
You have been checking my LinkedIn profile out, correct?
I have. I can't believe that. 1988. You must get this all the time, but you don't look old enough. Seriously, 32 years in IT. You started as a system
analyst. I've got a filter on the camera.
You've got a filter on the camera. Haven't we all? Haven't we all? But it's quite an interesting career, really, because you started as an IT analyst for Ideal Standard. Is that right?
Yeah, bathroom manufacturer.
Yeah, and then you moved on to be a business analyst for KCOM. That's Kingston Communications in Hull. For
Hull's
those
telephone company, so I moved to telecoms.
Yeah, and then obviously you moved into Ventura as the CTO. Do you want to just sort of start from there, really, and give us a bit of a background on your career history, because it is quite an interesting one.
Sure, I've been a geek all my life. I've been a technologist. I was a software developer out of school. I was supposed to be going to Newcastle University to study computer science. And during the summer period before I took my place at university, I saw a job advertised for a computer programmer at Ideal Standard, and realised I was about to go to university to spend 3 years to get that job. So I managed to get that job, started writing software for robots that were spray painting bathroom suites. If you ever want a baptism of fire, be the teenage computer developer that's dealing with people in a factory who don't care what your clever technology can do. They've got a job to do. And it was a great first career. Learned lots of software sort of development languages. Moved to Kingston Communications and just developed my IT career. Became a project manager. Moved to Ventura, which was a big contact center business in Leeds, which is now part of Capita Group. A huge organisation, 350 people at its height in its IT department, 12,000 staff answering calls for people, and got my first board role as their IT director. Moved on from there because I wanted to eventually be an MD or a chief executive of business. And in the call center industry, the ops director is going to get that job because he's got 12,000 staff. I've only got a couple of hundred staff. So I actually moved into digital marketing about 15 years ago, working with Google, understanding the technology of that. Moved to a business called Latitude Group, which was at its time one of the biggest independent digital marketing agencies based over in Warrington. It got acquired by Jellyfish recently. We created an offshoot business called Latitude White, which was doing digital marketing for small businesses, and I became the MD of that, so that was my first MD role. And we built that business, grew it really, really quickly, and sold it to private equity in 2007. Stayed on for about another 18 months after that sale, and then moved to Epiphany, which was another search marketing agency, much smaller. It was actually the smallest business I'd ever joined. There was 25 people at the point that I joined. But we just had huge ambition to grow it. And my job was to take all of my experience and learning from running much bigger companies and being part of much bigger corporates, embed it early into that business, and then just scale it for growth as quick as we could. We built that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later, but we ultimately took it through a sale process, very formal sale process, sold it to Jaywing PLC in 2014. I agreed to stay on post-sale if I could become the chief exec of the business that I sold to. I'd never been the chief exec of a PLC business before, so that was something new to learn. And I did that role for 5 years until I stepped down earlier on this year.
Really interesting. And so that's kind of a potted history there. So just going back to Epiphany, and before we obviously talk about Epiphany, David just said, "What a man cave you've got there," and you know, it was one of my. It's on my questions here because we've spoken before, and I've got to say it is the most impressive backdrop I've ever seen, really. So, talk to me a little bit about your love of Marvel, then, and where does this all come from?
Well, actually, and if you'd have ever visited my old office in Leeds, and a couple of people I think on this call have been there, it originates from a love of Star Wars. So, okay. I am a child of the 70s. I can still remember going to see Star Wars when I was 7 years old. It had a big impact on my life. So I've always loved that kind of stuff. I've got a charity running group called the Jedi Joggers. So we actually run in some of these costumes for charity. Some of these have been running in the past. So the only difference between 7-year-old me and late 40s me is that I now just have a little bit more money. And so I can buy some slightly nicer things. So some of them are bought at auction, some of them, not the ones here, but actually some of the ones that you can't see have been used in films. So I have got a little bit of a collection. But I've also just had the opportunity while I'm here on gardening leave to tidy things up a little bit and get it just how I like. So I'm going to quite miss going back into offices because I quite enjoy it here. But yeah, an absolute geek at heart, I've got to say. Well,
I think we've all sort of adapted our home offices, haven't we, to fit ourselves in. And it is that, you know, I'm looking at my backdrop now and thinking, oh yeah, you know, it's. But the guitar, you do play, I hope. Now I know
I do. I'm not great. It's interesting. That one was my first guitar. This one's a Gibson ES335, which was my all-time obsession guitar, but I promised myself I'd never buy it until I was good enough to justify it. And then about 2 years ago, realised that day would never come and life's too short. So I got it anyway. And again, you know, we've had some time to do it. And again, I'm a geek, so I do online guitar lessons over Zoom, and I subscribe to the Fender Play learning set. So there's still a technology edge to me learning to play the guitar, but nothing that I could write home about.
Now, what was really interesting when we first spoke, you know, I'm a child of the 70s as well, and I've been in recruitment for a long time. And, you know, I think my head and face suits the fact that more than you, but that's your marathon running, isn't it? You're an ultra marathon runner. You've done Ironmans. And you've got 2 tattoos, I believe.
You really have done your research, Sam. Blimey, okay.
Yes.
I'm not getting them out, but yes, that is true.
But they're Ironman tattoos, right?
Well, I decided that if I was ever going to get a tattoo, it needed to be something that you could tell the grandkids about. So you're right. I got into running about 10 years ago. I'd never done it before. I was a terrible runner at school, and I'm not a brilliant runner now. I can't run very fast. I can just run for a really, really long time. I decided I got into my running when I was just coming up to 40. Decided that everybody that I was working with at Epiphany at the time was younger and faster than me. So the only advantage I could have is just doing it for further. So I started doing 10Ks, it moved into marathon running, it moved into ultra marathon running. And then someone explained to me what a triathlon was. And then someone explained what an Ironman was. And I decided that there was huge bragging rights if you could do one of those. So I did one of those and got the Ironman logo on one leg. And then a few years ago, I did a desert race, the Marathon des Sables, which again is a nice bragging rights sort of credential. So I got that put on the other leg. So I'm hoping when I'm no longer running, and I've got grandkids on my knees and they're asking the story of, well, tell me about that, I'll have something decent to pitch to them, rather than I was drunk in a beaker or something like that.
Absolutely, yeah, no, definitely. Well, look, I mean, it's obviously I've been to an Ironman event, and it is really, really impressive. The distance that you swim, that you ride, and then you run, it's pretty unbelievable. And I take my hat off to anybody that does anything like that. I'm about 5K, 10K at a max runner at the moment, but I'm trying to get better. So you're my inspiration now.
Thank you.
Just going back to your early career at Ventura. Now, for those of people that don't know who Ventura are, big organisation in Leeds. You said they're now owned by Capita. They were originally, was it Leap 29? They were formed out of a sort of
it was Club
a layaway business. Is that right?
Yeah, they were called Club 24. They were actually owned by Next. So although we were a contact centre business, through a strange quirk which was their history, they were owned by Next. So Club 24.
Club 24, was that's right.
The personal financing arm of Next. So you could borrow 24 times your weekly payment to buy a suit from what was Hepworth the Tailors, and that division of Next realised it was very good at dealing with customers, managing finances, and then moved into contact centre management, and then moved from finance into telecoms, into utilities, and then started developing software for its clients. And that was the reason I joined, was because they had, as I said earlier, at its height, they had 350 people in the IT department. Even though they wouldn't tell people about the technology, they were talking about the contact center and the people on the phones. But an awful lot of our clients would always have technology problems, or systems that weren't working, or projects that ran over. And then our team would come in and solve those projects. So if you've ever had a student loan, there's a 1 in 3 chance it was on one of the systems my team's built. Half of O2's mobile network at one point was running on our billing system. Time Retail Finance's credit card system through B&Q was ours. So we were kind of the unsung heroes of developing really large volume software businesses. And that's how I cut my teeth and got my first board role.
Yeah. And I remember Ventura myself, because when I first started in recruitment, I think I said to you on our first call, I used to work with Eric Bedford, and yes. I placed COBOL Kicks and Adabas Natural programmers all on Y2K stuff. So I'm now really showing my age.
Well, I got my IT director's job 2 months after completing the Y2K projects. So yeah, we were the organisation that was contacting every recruiter we could to try and find COBOL programmers to Y2K sort of comply with an awful lot of old systems that were still running.
Yeah, interesting, really interesting. And then you went to Epiphany. Again, this is a lovely story, because you talk about actually putting skin in the game. So tell me, to buy into Epiphany, did you have to sell a car?
Oh God, right. I do know the interview you've read now. So the background to this was I moved from Ventura to Latitude and got experience in digital marketing and gearing a business up for a sale process, which we eventually did very successfully in 2007. And I wanted to do it again, and I wanted to be involved much earlier in the stage. So the 2 original founders, we were like the 3 musketeers. I loved working with them. There was huge passion and energy for what we were doing, but it was important we also had parity, and there needed to be nothing we couldn't talk about. And so I needed to be an equity owner. So I bought 10% of the business, but I did sell my car at the time in order to fund that, which was one of the best investments I've ever made. But what it also meant for us is we were growing the business rapidly, and when we eventually got it ready for sale, we were all talking as equals. We could always talk about our dividend policies. There was no secret conversations, and it just meant that we knew going into that sale process why we were all there, what we'd agreed to do, what we were expecting to receive out the back of it. So yes, I did sell my car.
Okay. And we obviously the whole subject of today's roundtable is all around how you've prepared businesses for that sale process, and you've bought and sold agencies in the past. Can you expand just a little bit about that work that was involved as an agency owner and a business owner to prepare that business for sale then?
Yeah, I think, you know, we always had an ambition with Epiphany to perform some kind of transaction when the time was right, partly to recognise value, but partly because we all believed it was necessary for the next stage of growth of that business to become part of something else, whether it was either going to be funded by private equity to grow or whether it was going to trade sale to be part of another business. So we started planning for that back when we had 25 staff. We had nearly 200 at the point that we sold it. And that started with, I mean, we used to have sessions around my kitchen table, just saying, you know, what are our ambitions, both personally and for the business? What shape business would we like to create? What would we like to be famous for? We put a plan in place. My background being part of much larger organizations was always that you would have a business plan and a financial plan and something to measure yourselves by. And it was always a risk as a private business when there was only 3 of us owning it, that if you had a bad year, as long as, you know, you were still trading and making some money, you didn't put that pressure on yourself. And we wanted that pressure. We wanted a plan to aim for, and we wanted a plan that we could share with all of our teams as well. One of the key points of growing that business, that we were completely transparent with our teams. Everyone knew our ambitions. Everyone knew every year the target that we were setting ourselves, our performance against that target. We knew when to celebrate and when we needed to knuckle down and try harder. So I think we put all those plans in really early, and we used to call it aggressive organic growth. We delivered on those plans, and we pushed it really hard. And then as we got closer to the point of, I think we could start thinking about a transaction. This was still probably 2 years before we finally completed it. We put a fantastic operating board in place, real industry experts that were hugely ambitious, wanted to take that next step up. We made sure that the 2 original founders actually took 6 months out of the business completely. We wanted to be able to demonstrate to any potential acquirer, because these guys didn't want, you know, hugely long earn-out periods, that they were not material to the growth of the company anymore. That operating board was. They actually hated it. 6 months of kind of kicking their heels. And we also we worked with really formal advisors. We spent a long time choosing who would help us take our business to market, prepare our business for sale. It's usually quite a long process. It's certainly intense and stressful, and we wanted to make sure we did it with people that we trusted and got on with and could enjoy the journey with. And actually that was one of the best pieces of advice that we took, because the advisors that we chose, and we worked with Clarity in the end, when they looked at our forecast going forward, they said, look, do you absolutely have to sell this year? Because based on these growth plans, if you could actually close off this year's number and sell on next year's number, you'll get a much better value for the business, and we can probably talk to a different range of potential acquirers because you've already hit that scale. And, you know, we were all quite happy to continue doing that. What it actually allowed us to do is we had enough time for the 2 original founders to come back into the business, not to work on anything for its core operation and undo the work that we'd done putting the operating board in place, but that allowed us to launch our business in Australia, and it allowed us to launch our digital PR business. And so that brought in 2 new revenue streams. It broadened the appeal of the business, and it just meant that when we did finally go to market, there was more organisations that were interested in adding us into the mix.
So it was really a well-executed plan, getting buy-in from everybody in the business, and then appointing the right advisors. Those 3 things were probably key, were they?
We had an EMI scheme in place to reward our teams as well, and that was based partly on seniority and impact in the business, but also longevity. So our digital marketing has notoriously high staff turnovers, so it kept our staff churn down. Because people wanted to be part of something bigger. They were excited about the journey. There was no secret meetings going on in separate offices that people didn't know about. And it just meant we could be transparent about it. And when we did complete that transaction, we could celebrate it, because we ended up doing a sale that we thought was best for the long-term growth of that business, and it expanded its reach.
And do you think nowadays there's still a market? You know, obviously we're going through really, really unprecedented times. But how do you think the market's changed now? And do you think there is still a market for an independent agency to go out there and do what you did with Epiphany?
It's been through an interesting cycle, because probably for digital agencies, if I go back 5 or 6 years ago, there was a lot of us, we were growing our businesses, and there were a number of transactions that happened, and there have been in the intervening years. And a lot of that old guard of digital agencies have become part of something bigger. They've been acquired by private equity and merged with other organisations. They've done trade sales. And then we went through a bit of a fallow period where there weren't very many independent agencies out there all growing. And I think that started to change as some of the original people in the industry have come back into it again. And they've got more funding behind them, and they're going for a second time. And I think there's some really smart businesses now that are not just being traditional digital agencies, but technology businesses or companies having a greater point of difference. And they're growing quickly. They're finding a niche. They're taking good advice. I think one of the challenges that we had back in the early days growing our business was just access to talent. It's just really hard to find high quality people that could deliver a good service for your clients that we could be proud of. So we had to grow our own. We created our own graduate scheme, and it's amazing to see some of those people that were on our grad scheme 7 or 8 years ago own their own agencies now. So now at least access to talent is still hard. It's always been hard, but it's not as hard as it was back in the day. And I think our clients now, chief execs, CMOs, digital marketing directors, do understand the industry more, and so what we're selling is more understood. There are larger budgets put to one side, and let's be honest, the current crisis that we're living through at the moment has demonstrated the absolute necessity for getting online right, being fleet of foot, using that marketing data to be able to pivot your marketing strategy in unusual times.
Yeah, and when we talk about digital marketing, it's funny, isn't it? Because for years, a digital agency, you immediately think of just pure digital marketing. How do I get my marketing campaigns right? How do I deliver them, and how do I measure them? And now, do you think, you mentioned there that companies are really carving out a niche, and I know that your business recruited a lot of data people. Did you find that you sort of deliberately moved into data as a service offering, or was it just a natural, were you ahead of the game in that respect, do you think?
I think it was a natural transition for us as a search agency to what, and this is ultimately why we sold to a business that had such strong credentials in data, because we'd always, we'd celebrated the fact that we were in the measurable part of marketing. And the thing that powered our business was understanding that data, finding that diamond in the information that we'd been looking at, sharing that with our client, and enhancing their marketing strategy. So the more access to that data that we could get, the more timely we could get it, and the caliber of data scientists that we could get access to was another point of differentiation for us. And I think that's only going to continue. The smart businesses are absolutely leveraging that data. One of my favorite statements that I'd say if I was meeting a chief executive of a business, as an open-ended question, is just to say, so what are you doing with your data? And it's amazing to see people suddenly reflect and it's like, well, yeah, we do talk about data a lot, but what are you doing with it? What are you doing within your business to differentiate yourself from your competition? And I think some of the businesses that are weathering our current storm better than others are the ones who know what's going on. They've got much more access to real-time information. They're being able to use that information to make decisions on what it is that they need to change within their organization, whether it's to pull back on marketing spend or double down and push on the channels that are working. And the smart CMOs are using that data to justify to their wider boards why they need greater marketing investment or why certain channels need greater investment. And it's no longer now just that simple return on investment for one particular channel. Yeah. The data is the thing that is connecting everything together and showing those customer journeys. And it's allowing people more confidently to invest in channels that don't immediately demonstrate that return on investment. Often, digital brand building, traditional brand building, some social media channels, it's often quite hard to measure that immediate return. But when you can demonstrate its contributory factor to an ultimate sale, then you're demonstrating a much more joined up thinking. And I think more and more now, consumers want that connected environment. It was great to see on Monday this week that everyone stood outside Primark queuing, but it was a sunny day, and it's not sunny today, and I bet the queues are a lot lower. And those people want to be able to have that online and offline experience, and that's going to be forced upon us for some time to come. And they want the retailer to feel that they are joined up. That they want the retailer to know that, well, I've already been shopping on your website and I've bought many of these products before. So when I'm talking to you in store, whether it's about a return or placing a particular product, they expect you to know more about you as a consumer. And it's the data that glues it all together.
Yeah. And it's well, I go back to the late 90s where I placed a contractor in a company, and the amount of times a contractor would say to me after an interview, yeah, I've been for the interview, and they took me out to the porter cabins where the IT department is based, or down in the basement, Arcadia Group, in Leeds, their
Yes.
IT department was in the basement, and they were locked away. And I think now, 25 years later, it's not just about IT being a separate department and from marketing, from finance. It's about bringing that all together. And I think data is playing a huge part in that. Do you think then that your experience, having come from a technical background, helped you as a CEO for a digital agency? Because you see a lot of CEOs and owners of digital agencies who have a marketing background, or they started out in media and advertising. Not many have come through from a tech background like you. Do you think that's helped you? And how has that kind of shaped your career, do you think?
I think it just gave me a different path. I think my skill when I was working purely in technology as a developer or an analyst or a project manager is that I was good with people. I like people. I loved managing teams. I loved seeing my teams grow. And so my skill as a developer was because I was able to talk, thinking back to those big blokes at Ideal Standard making bathroom suites, and me trying to explain to them why they had to use this particular barcode scanner. I could at least find a reason why it was important to them. And so I could get their buy-in and their involvement. And so taking those personal skills, along with that background in technology, I think that's what's helped me, especially in an agency model, where you've got to be able to engage and empathize with your client, because you're being trusted with their money. And you've got to be able to engage with your teams to sell the dream of what you're trying to achieve and create good futures for them. So I think it was just it was a different background, but the thing that cuts through for me always has been it's the people side of it.
No, I totally agree. And the amount of companies I speak to who always say, a lot about communication skills from a tech point of view is really, really crucial when anybody's hiring anybody at any sort of senior level. Being able to liaise with senior stakeholders and anybody in your business is crucial in that respect. And that's great, Rob. Last question from me, and then I'm gonna put it out to the floor, because I know we've got probably some good people on the call today that I know would want to get involved. So you've worked with a lot of data-driven clients. What would you say to them now? That's the clients. If they want to stay competitive, what should they be looking at for the future from a tech point of view? And is that all about COVID, or actually should we not always just kind of jump on COVID? Should we be a little bit more strategic about the future as well?
I think at the broadest level, actually, one of the biggest challenges most businesses have just got at the moment is just their cash flow and the cash reserves. It's less to do with the structure of the business or the niche that they're in. No one saw this coming. It was impossible to predict the impact it would have on businesses. And so actually some companies are struggling purely because they were just structured in different ways. I've seen the same for agencies, that some agencies that are doing really well, were fortunate that they happen to have clients in an industry that's been less impacted, and some amazing agencies that are really having to make tough decisions right now just because they happen to have a client mix that's been immediately impacted by this. And as agency owners, we always used to look at our client penetration, and we'd be worried if we had one client that was too big. In this scenario right now, it's more about the sector that you're in, and I don't think everyone has been able to predict this. I think for the clients that are out there at the moment, again, it's back to the point I was making before. It's making smart, informed decisions based on the information that's being presented to you right now. And you know, I've certainly seen some retailers who have realised that my entire store network is going to be on ice for a while, who've doubled down with their online advertising, and have gone really heavy because they said, look, if I don't get revenue coming through from this, I'm not getting it anywhere. Some people are taking slightly more conservative views, and so from their paid and performance marketing side of things, they've just pushed really hard because it's the channel that's been available to them. And we've also seen an awful lot of the retailers that have been slow to come online and have had to accelerate that really rapidly. And I think that's, you know, I've seen some agencies growing really quickly because a lot of organisations have said, yeah, do you know what, that decision we've been putting off for a while because we were still doing okay. Now it's a matter of life and death. If we can't trade online, we'll have no trade at all.
Yeah. And well, I was talking to a retail analyst last Friday, and we filmed the video chat with her, and she's only like half an hour chat, but we were talking about the difference between Germany and the UK and how the Germans are, you know, setting up their retailers to be a very different experience. And I don't think we've properly appreciate the difference this is going to make. But you're quite right. The likes of TK Maxx and Primark, their business model is based purely around what's coming into the store today. What can we flog today? And it's that there's no, you know, ASOS, a classic. There's no 4 seasons anymore. There's seasons every 2 weeks. Every 2 to 3 weeks, they're releasing new stuff, and it's coming straight to store or online. So it is going to be interesting to see how the likes of those retailers do cope with this.
And you just need to look at the success of companies like Boohoo that have had a data-first business. You know, they've always been an online business. They can understand whether it's a smart thing to buy the assets of Accessorize and Monsoon, but to execute it in a digital and online space. So it's, you know, it's not surprising that those are the organisations that have been able to make very rapid decisions and make the most of this. Yeah.
Well, listen, Rob, I really appreciate your time with me today. We've got probably 15, 20 people on the call, I think, today. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. If anybody would like to ask a question of Rob, just unmute yourself and feel free. You can digitally raise your hand and crack on, or you can just go for it, and we'll take our first question.
I'll go first.
Okay, Susan.
Yeah, hiya. Hi, Rob. You were talking there about how you love to manage teams, and obviously with the greater data, there's a lot more transparency. Do you feel that that's made you've had to get people to be a lot more accountable? The accountability is a lot more obvious with a data-driven company compared to some other businesses where the data isn't quite so transparent.
Yeah, I think it does, and that accountability should always be there. And yeah. You know, the best parts of my career is rewarding those people who are doing well, and I think all that does is just increase the level of transparency, and you know, hopefully the cream rises to the top. You know, for me, for the guys that I've typically led that have been running, you know, digital campaigns for people. That it's great to see that cause and effect. It's not all about the numbers. We manage human beings, and while digital marketing has been a huge success in the marketing sphere, there is still elements of it that are subjective. You've been doing really well, and then it just needs one of your competitors to start bidding heavily because they're financed differently or their profit margins are different, and that can impact you. But if you're doing the right things, one of the big parts for me of my early experience from working from with really big companies is that importance of putting the right processes in place, putting the right controls in place. When you've got thousands of staff, you have to do that. When you've got 20, 30, 40 staff, you can probably manage without it.
Yeah.
But the smart businesses that can go from 20 people to 200 people have still bothered to put the effort into those processes so that they can measure their staff, but support their staff. And they have less of those growth pains. The number of friends that I've got that have been growing agencies, and they seem to have a wobble at 20 people, a wobble at 50 people, always find it hard to sort of breach the 100 mark. And I think a lot of that comes from, it's harder to be everywhere in the business. And I was at an event that Google laid on a couple of years ago, and there was a guy speaking there that was asking agency CEOs, how much time are you spending in your business and how much time are you spending on your business? And having that mindset of, God, am I spending every waking minute just in the business? And I'm enjoying it, and I've probably been doing it for a decade, but that means no one is thinking about the business remotely. And so even if it's just that you're taking a day or half a day each week just to say, right, I'm coming out of the business, I'm going to look at it from the outside. And certainly some of my best successes of when we've had good non-execs that have been willing to hold that mirror up to me or to the rest of the board. And then, the great non-execs just ask you the bleedingly obvious questions that never occur to you. You can feel yourself flush up, and the value in that is absolutely huge.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. David, I think, and then we'll take Tom. David, you've digitally raised your hand.
Hello, Rob. Yeah, it's got to be done digitally. It's the way we roll these days. It's really good. So I run a data analytics company, and it's interesting to hear you talk about real time and wanting to know what's happening now, not what happened yesterday or last week. I still see in big organizations, particularly I would say coming from the sort of the IT sphere rather than the business. The business is saying, I want real time. IT is saying, no, it's too expensive, it's too complicated, and you don't really need it. I think I remember a time where and I was guilty of this. I said, no, iPads will never take off. We don't need them. We've got laptops, we've got desktop computers, they all work fine. I think we've been talking a lot about real-time integration of systems like SAP and Salesforce into data warehouses, so that actually there's a streaming feed, and it's a demo we're building out at the moment. What do you say to the kind of IT guys who are still saying, no, yesterday's data is okay? Where it's sometimes hard to kind of have that argument, because to just say, well, it's coming, whether you guys like it or not, is not necessarily a business case to do real time.
I couldn't agree with you more. And actually for me, the killer point is, what is the specific data you need in real time, and what don't you need? And technologists want a reason. We need that background. We need that logic. We need that validation. And if as a company, it can't work out which data is relevant in real time and which can wait, then I don't think you've got that justification. I've seen it before where we've had tenders through from organisations, and they've asked for an awful lot of information that they want on daily reporting packs, or they want a portal building so they can have access to it. And the moment you start to get under the skin of that and ask them questions for, well, this particular statistic, can you tell me why you would need it hourly or even daily? And they'll struggle to answer you, because actually they're not entirely sure, but it must sound better just to say, well, I want everything. And from my background, from a digital marketing point of view, some of the data that you need, you actually need it to mature, because having that data immediately can make you make an incorrect decision. So I was speaking to someone who's in retail, in clothing retail, and they were saying, we never look at what our sales figures are until we've passed the expiration date for returns, because we can have an amazing day on online sales, but let's be honest, and if you're anything like my wife, you'll buy one product, but you'll buy it in 4 different sizes, and 3 of them are going back home, going back to the retailer again. So it may look like a great day for sales, but until you pass that period, actually it's not it's not an actionable piece of data. And so if the business can't define which data it needs in real time to the point that a technologist can agree with you, then you're right, I think it's really hard to sell to them. That's where your good analysts come in to be able to break it down.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for that, David. Tom, do you want to, I'll unmute you. Oh no, you've unmuted yourself, so please fire away.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Hello, sir. It's nice to see you, Tom.
Nice to see you too, mate. Right, so I'm keen to pick up on the point about transparency of strategy back at Epiphany. I mean, obviously it can apply to any organisation you've worked at, but you specifically mentioned Epiphany and being transparent. I'm just keen to know, when it came to exit and planning for exit, were you transparent with your plans there? Whether you were or not, at what stage were you transparent, or did you let the guys know? And what was your reason and decision making behind that transparency, or maybe lack of, when it came to exit and exit strategy?
We were as transparent as legally we could, because it was still a business of 100, I think it was 150, 160 at the point we went to market. They can tell when you are locked in rooms with a load of people in suits that are coming in to give you advice. And then when you begin your sale process and you're doing initial meetings and the beauty parade of your agency, they can absolutely tell. And we wanted them to know, because we knew that during that period that goes on for many months, we needed them to step up, because we weren't going to be as close to the business. And, you know, there's a real cliche that the number of businesses that sell, the next quarter that they have is terrible because they've taken their eye off the ball. And we needed to make sure that we continue that growth. It's the reason we put the operating board in place. It's the reason why we had team heads. So we were open and honest about it. And we were open and honest because we weren't just doing that process in order to recognize some value for the business. We were doing it because we felt it was important for the next stage of growth for the business. So there was, you know, we had to have a clearing of conscience so that we could say to people that there's no one in our sale process that we didn't feel was going to be the right thing for the next stage of growth for the business. And interestingly, with a number of the trade buyers that we spoke to, where I had initial coffees with people who'd sold businesses to their network, for example, and we took them out of the process because we just knew that it would not be the right thing for the long-term growth of the business. And let's be honest, when you sell an organisation, you've got an earn-out period as well. You don't want that business to go off the rails. And for me, and I suppose it was one of our advantages, I was committed to stay with the business for a significant period of time beyond it as well. And I needed to be able to justify why we'd make that choice. So yeah, we were, and it worked really well for us.
Can I just ask one little follow-up there, Sam? Is that okay?
Of course you can, Tom, yeah.
So, Rob, when you entered the business in 2007, I'm assuming that you'll have sat down and within a relatively short amount of time, you'll have started to plan some kind of exit. In theory, in 2017, you could have communicated that to the team. Maybe you did. I suppose you've given a really good idea as to when you're sort of getting close to the actual exit, how to treat that. What about in 2008? Would you have made it really clear to the team of 25, look guys, what we're doing here is we're gearing up for an exit. It might not happen for 6 years, 7, 8 years maybe, but that's what we're doing. The reason I'm asking is, I suppose from my own personal point of view, I'm keen to understand whether that could have a negative effect on staff morale. Some staff immediately worrying that means that, well, I'm a finance person, the acquiring company may have a team of finance people, I'm going to get made redundant, so I'm going to leave now. That would be my big fear. Well,
no, it's a really good point, and it was not throughout growing that business. The main thing we talked about was achieving our plan, and we wanted to celebrate the success of that plan, and that was, you know, people getting bonuses for hitting certain numbers, and it was the pride of growth, and we, you know, celebrating success we knew how to do. So no, we were transparent about it because also we had an EMI scheme in place. So when people joined us at certain times, we'd do allocations through the EMI scheme. So they knew it was there, but it was not the day-to-day conversation of the business. And even for myself and the two original founders, it was also not our day-to-day conversation. You suddenly start to divert your strategy if the only thing you're trying to achieve is a sale process. What we were trying to achieve was something we could be really proud of, that could continue to grow, and a sale process was one of the steps on that growth. Because for us, we had a number of trade buyers involved in the process, but we had a number of private equity companies involved in the process as well. And if we'd have gone down the private equity route, which I'd done with Latitude, that was all just about accelerating the growth of the business. It was to say, look, the reason we're going to private equity is we want access to more capital to do even more for us, and we could turn our organic growth into non-organic growth through acquisitions and further investments. So it was always still with the intention of building something we could be proud of. Because if your entire business strategy is just to sell the business, you'll probably actually end up building something that nobody wants.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. That was really, really interesting. Very insightful.
Thank you for that, Tom. Really good, that, and very insightful. And I'm sure it's a massive challenge, that, Rob, to balance what you can and can't say with a team. It must be very, very difficult. So we've had a couple of other hands raised. Akil, I think you'd like to ask a question. Do you want to take yourself off mute? And
yes, and maybe I'll come.
There we go. We can see you now. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm very good. Good to see you. I have a couple of questions. The first question is maybe a little bit personal. It's about you're a little bit of a rock star now in the industry in terms of going into businesses, and
you're being very generous, Ashil.
to sell them. So what's next for you? Now you are in this phase, because the economy is kind of shaping up for your skill set, in essence. I think a lot of businesses will probably look at acquiring other businesses that are performing as well, who might not be data first, etc. So could be an
well, for the amount I can share, and obviously we do know each other, Ashil, so you've cut straight to the quick there. You know, I sold my last business, so when I want to leave it, I've got a period of gardening leave that is enforced. I've just been extremely fortunate that gardening leave is burning away while not an awful lot is happening right now. And I am genuinely working on my garden during gardening leave, which I don't think I've cut the grass in 9 years. I had to go out and buy a lawnmower to be able to do it, which I did online, and it was very successful. So yeah, I have to sit out of the industry for a while. I will definitely be back. I've got a lot of very nice thinking time, and you know, you're right. I think there's going to be some organisations that don't weather this storm quite so well, and there may be opportunities there. I think there will be a phase of M&A activity. I'm already seeing in the trade press there's a number of mergers and businesses coming together, and it sounds absolutely lovely, but let's be honest, we can all write a press release, and it wouldn't surprise me if some of those, or some of the ones in the future, are more out of necessity than strategic advantage. But I think there will be more organisations trying to consolidate, but also, you know, very, very smart organisations crop up in these unusual times, and I think there'll be some people who start things that are new, just on the back of the fact that all consumer behaviour is going to change right now.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashil. David, did you have another question? Your hand is digitally raised. No, you're all good. Okay. It's been a great. Oh, David, have you raised your hand again? No. Okay, you've lowered your hand. Rob, thank you very much for today. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to all the people that have attended. And thank you for the questions. If anybody else has got any other questions they'd like to ask, I think, Susan, have you got another question?
No, not at this time, no. Lots to think about, though.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Really appreciate it. Like I said before, I'm going to record this. Well, we've been recording this, so it'll be available to look at online in the next 7 days. It's been a pleasure so far hosting these events, and we want to keep them going. Everyone is going to be a slightly different format and a different topic. And the topics are driven from you. So we want to hear from you about what you want us to talk about. A lot of the people that we've had on these roundtables so far are people that I know and people I've spoken to in the last 3 or 4 months. And part of our business strategy so far has been around building this network of people at a senior level, and then being able to actually confidently go to a market and say, well, if you're recruiting, whether it be for permanent people, whether it be interim or consultants, we've got this network of people that we know, we like, we've met, we trust. They've talked about their, their expertise at great length, and we know them and we'd like to introduce them to you. So that's been kind of the driver for us, and it is just about building relationships. And I thank everybody so far that's attended. We've had about 85 to 90 people that have attended our roundtable so far, and we're going to hopefully do them over the next few weeks and keep doing them. Next week we've got a really enigmatic chap called Jimmy Hosang. Jimmy runs an organisation called the Modular Analytics Company, easy for me to say, and he always jokes that was such a bad name he gave his company, but it really works and it really reflects his energy and his character. He's from Manchester. He's going to be talking about speech and text analytics and how he's going up against Amazon and providing not only a viable alternative to Amazon, but a far, I'm not going to say cheaper, but he'll say it. He'll say, yeah, we're cheaper, it's fine. A far more value for money product compared to Amazon. So if you want to find out about that next week, please join us next Thursday at 11 o'clock. And if you'd like to contribute in the future, we'd love to hear from you. But thank you very much for today. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Sam. Cheers.
Brilliant. Cheers, Sam.
Susan.
Thanks, guys.
Simon.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.